So welcome everyone to NTU, physically, in body and in spirit and digitally via the internet. It's really great to have you here. I'm very pleased actually. It's a real win for our department because I think this is the biggest, most populated history seminar we've had all year, and with very good reason. I'm I cannot be more pleased to introduce somebody who say my best friend in the world is arrived across the world and best friends for many reasons. Actually, my son was asking me that you never grew up with him. You didn't like go to school together. Why are you best friends? Like, because we read each other's work and we're like, yeah, like we're on we think about the same issues from the same place. And it's just inexpressible how what a delight it is to be able to welcome the esteemed professor, Dr. Pio Salguero, who has so what we really hope today to be sort of not just a regular, comment. You've done some research on a particular topic and talk about its ramifications, and a talk that slots into the many other forms. Because Pierce is actually, at this for someone so young and so friendly at his amazingly high stature place in his career, and he's achieved an incredible amount. When he was in graduate school, is it okay if I leave some personal amusing deals? He used to be called the machine because he would just like churn out papers like anything, and just as amazing to produce. And so Prof. Salguero had this background in writing long before getting into graduate school because he was also had 8 years studying Thai massage in Thailand, at which point he also had some time as a monk. And so when he returned to the US, he also published for the Thai massage community multiple books, which are not going to be on the illustrious CV, but I just want to play out that there's many dimensions to Dr. Salguero, which we want to bring out to today to kind of do somewhat of a sort of a career overview, because Dr. Salguero is, as I've been introducing to everyone these last few days here in Singapore, kind of one of the key figures in the history of Buddhist medicine. He's been the one person who's really turned Buddhist medicine from a question into an entire field. And that's not only because of his own insight into the trajectory of that as a question that can bring in many different scholarly fields and interests and types of expertise, but because of his personal nature of just being open and supportive and generally a good fellow in the scholarly community, so which has encouraged many people to come and join the flock, as we'll see if I can jump in on your slide. So some of the things that Dr. Salguero worked with was his first his dissertation book, which is in the bottom center, translating Buddhist medicine in medieval China, really looked at kind of some of the key mechanisms of how Buddhist medicine came into China. And then from that, he invited people to join him in starting to translate for the modern day scholars, not only in the history of Buddhism, but also for the history of medicine and for undergraduates to read. And it's very specific. These must not be overburdened with highfalutin technical architectures, scholarly backup that's going to choke the learning of young students. So really, a lot of Dr. Salguero's work has been to outreach and to really use maybe the scholarly upaya of this expedient means of bringing this knowledge as digestibly, if that's an adverb, into to support access. And people have happily jumped along in. So this Buddhist and Medicine volume in the center top on the right was a major landmark that I was very happy to contribute to, and had dozens, literally dozens of chapters. It's the biggest thing that's ever come out in Buddhist medicine. And then another anthology on Japanese medicine, and then anthology of modern pieces, and then he's also written from that synthesis the global history of Buddhism and medicine, and now moving into sort of more ethnographic work on Buddhism and healing in the modern world, plus making those ethnographies accessible digitally through the jivaka.net website, which you'll hear about. So But what I really, because this is the plethora of work, it's kind of a shame to just focus in on one study. But I've asked Dr. Sokora to um, present today is using one case to kind of bring us into his career as a scholar, and his vision that brought him to this field and through this growth of the field. Um, both as a way of getting us to get an overview of Buddhist medicine and how the different aspects that we may contact can fit into that larger interconnected world. But also for those of us growing scholars, and I see myself as following in his footsteps too, we can also learn about how to do scholarship, whether it's from whether you're a grad student, assistant, associate prof, or just a reader, interested reader. How what is it like walking this path, the path that Dr. Sokora has worked? So I think I've talked enough, and I really want to hand over the floor to the man of the moment. So let's welcome him first.
Thank you, Mike, for the invitation, but also for the really generous introduction and for many years of friendship and conversation. So Mike and I, Buddhism and medicine, Taoism and medicine, we're kind of like yin and yang. We kind of fit together well with a lot of back and forth without either one of us trying to overcome the other, right?
Yeah,
Nice
yeah,
balance.
yeah.
So although I do feel a little bit old being asked to come and give a retrospective of my career, so
Perspective.
but I'm happy to be here, very happy to be in Singapore, and really happy to meet all of you, and hopefully we can get to know each other a little bit better. I'm going to be running off after this talk, but if you please would take my email down and send me an email, and I'm very happy to be in communication with you about your projects, about anything that I can help with. So please keep in touch. So yes, I'm going to kind of walk you through my process of becoming a scholar and introduce along the way some of the central questions that I have been thinking about for the last 30 years. This was what Mike asked me to do as a way of kind of showing how a career develops from lots of different angles. My own career has been focused on Buddhist medicine, but it has come at that topic from many different directions over the years. And so I want to share some of that story with you. I'm going to break it up into some time periods, and I'm going to start with 1997 to 2001. So I graduated from university, from undergraduate, with a degree in anthropology in 1996. And I was interested in Asia. I was interested in Buddhism, but I had never been to Asia. I had never met a Buddhist. I had never had any kind of personal contact with Asian religions or traditions of any kind. So I came in 1997, I came to Southeast Asia. I was in Singapore for like 6 hours, but I spent a long time in Thailand. And so while I was in Thailand, I spent a little bit of time. This is me, 22 years old. I spent a little bit of time as a anagarika in a temple in eastern Thailand, Wat Pananachat, which is a place you can go if you don't speak Thai, and you can become a monk there. So I'm not actually a monk. I was a lay person with white robes, and I spent the summer there. So not very long, but interested in learning to practice Buddhism and becoming, sort of steeped in meditation and sort of the lifestyle of a monastic, and to see if that was something I was interested in doing more seriously. Anyway, while I was at Wat Pananachat, one night I was with some fellow anagarikas, and one of our group was bitten by a takab. You must have these in Singapore, no? Yeah. What are they called here?
Centipede. Yeah, tubiatal.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so this ties to the dakab. Um, they're rather poisonous. They're pretty painful if you get bitten by this. So there was a young guy that was part of our group that was bitten by one, kind of up on his inner thigh, and it was very painful. He collapsed on the floor and started to hyperventilate. He was having an allergic reaction, or like a sort of like what looked like a seizure. He was his body was really tense, and he was shaking. And somebody in the group ran and got the Dr. Monk, was what they called him. Dr. Monk was a herbalist. He knew about the forest plants. We were in the middle of the forest. He knew about the plants in the forest, and he got together some plants and made a tea, and told us, have this man drink this tea every 2 hours, and you must help him to chant Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sammasambuddhassa, the Buddhist sort of standard Buddhist chant in Thailand. You must help him to chant this all night long until he feels better. So we did this. We stayed up with him and stayed up the night chanting together with him. And in my mind, my sort of young, naive Western mind, um, I saw this as being the herbal medicine that must be medicinal, and the chanting, that's religion, right? So we were it's like, the real medicine is the herbs, and the chanting is the 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 spiritual side. Yeah, the spiritual side, right? We're calling on the Buddha to ask for the Buddha's protection, right? So this, for me, I understood this at the time as being, there's medicine and there's religion. They're two different things. But what I noticed over the night as I was chanting with this young guy is how the chanting actually was also medicine, not just spiritual, not just because of calling on the Buddha, not just because of some kind of spiritual powers or magic powers or anything like that, but because of the effect that chanting has on your body. Namo tassa bhagavato, this long chanting coming from your belly, right, requires a certain kind of breathing in order to do it properly. And that certain kind of breathing, when you're in the middle of a seizure and your body's shaking, right? That certain kind of breathing regulation that this boy was being instructed to do was actually regulating somehow his breathing. It was sort of vibrating, relaxing his chest. It was bringing him sort of down into his body, and it was having an actual physiological response. So some people in this room already know that chanting has a physiological response on your body, but I didn't know that at the time. I learned that watching this that night. And this is one of the things that made me realize that religion and medicine are not different things. There's medicine, there's medicinal value hidden within religious traditions that if we just think, oh, that's the religion, that's the spirituality, we miss the physiological, the medical, the healing power of these traditions. Um, so meanwhile, also in Thailand, also during the same time period, I was also becoming interested in traditional Thai medicine. So traditional Thai medicine, is a field involves herbal medicine, it involves massage, it involves kind of like chiropractic, doing yoga, kind of to each other. Maybe some people here are familiar with Thai medicine. And I was studying at the Shivaga Komapat Traditional Medicine Hospital in Chiang Mai, um, with this man, Ajahn Sinton, who is a very well-known master of Northern Thai style medicine, the Lana region in Northern Thailand. So I was there learning medicine, learning how to prescribe herbs and how to do massage and so on and so forth. But every single morning and every single afternoon, the beginning and ending of the workday, we would perform the Jivaka Waikru. So Jivaka Waikru is the Y for the respect for the guru, Jivaka. And who's Jivaka? Jivaka is the Buddha's doctor in the Pali Canon. He's the doctor of the Sangha, the Buddhist monks in the Pali Canon. And what Ajahn Sinton, this is my teacher, what he was doing every morning, every afternoon, was calling Jivaka, not only respecting a teacher that lived long ago, but actually calling Jivaka's presence to come into the clinic and calling Jivaka's presence to come into our hands so that we could help the patients, right? And of course, this is, being in Thailand, this is a kind of an invocation ritual, but it's very much in a Buddhist frame. So it's, again, chanting Buddhist chants, and the Buddha's right there. Kind of this whole ritual was taking place in a Buddhist kind of framework. So again, where's the religion, where's the medicine, right? This is the traditional medicine hospital, and we're invoking Jivaka into our hands so that we can help, so that Jivaka can help the patients through our hands, right? So what I learned in Thailand early, when I first became interested in both Buddhism and traditional medicine, is that they're intertwined together. You go to learn Buddhism, you learn medicine. You go to learn medicine, you learn Buddhism, right? They're tied, they're connected. So that was my first exposure to Asian medicine. My first exposure to Buddhism, to Asian religions, was, oh, they're not different things. They're intertwined together. They're inseparable. So this is my kind of introduction to the whole topic, was to realize that they actually belong fused together. Right? So some other examples while I was in northern Thailand. Maybe some of you have been to northern Thailand. Maybe people in this room know more about this than I do. But some other examples of healing techniques that I learned as part of the medicine that I was learning. So Nuat is massage. So this is a practice of pressing certain points in the body, moving the limbs, so on and so forth. There's many ways that religion and spirituality or different practices, not just Jivaka coming into our hands to help the patient, but this is an example of a massage tool that has magic symbols on the prongs that you use as you push into the patient's body. You're pushing blessings or pushing protection, pushing different kinds of powers into their body. You can also do that with Doksen, which is also both the mallet and the nail. They both have the same characters painted onto them, right? So you're hitting the power of the symbols into the body, and you're always doing Doksen. You're doing duck duck duck, duck duck duck, duck duck duck, 3 at a time, right? Which is Buddha Dharma Sangha, right? So there's a very Buddhist kind of intention why you do 3 3 3 3 3. Yamkang was a technique of pressing bad influences out of the body, using the foot over the fire, heat up the foot. You dip the foot into the oil, which is in the bowl, and then you use the foot to press the bad influences out of the body. You'll notice that both in the previous slide in the Toksen, he has tattoos on his arms and hands, the practitioner, right? He's got amulets and protective talismans around his neck, and here is also the same case for Yamkang. In this case, the tattoos are on the leg, and there's also talismans around the practitioner's waist, right? So the practitioners are always participating in this sort of both using these Buddhist symbols and objects to heal the person, but then also to protect themselves at the same time. So there's always both of those happening. So in northern Thailand, I spent some time like interviewing, shadowing, learning with some also not just healers like in the previous slides, people who are professional healers, but also with Lucy, who are professional magic practitioners who also deal with a whole lot of different kinds of healing techniques. And one example, this Lucy is involved in doing a whole sort of ritual for healing, to heal kind of for the space. This is being done in a medicine clinic, so it's a healing for all of the patients. And it's kind of an empowerment for the practitioners to get everybody recharged for the year doing this ceremony. I'm sure many of these things are familiar to people in the room. Sakyan is now I think a very well-known part of at least Thai magical practice, but in this case also healing practice. So the practitioners themselves, as I mentioned, they have tattoos on parts of their body to protect themselves, and they also do tattoos to so this Lucy is doing tattoos for other practitioners to protect them, tattoos for people to protect them from illness, and so forth. Chanting mantras, or in Thai mon. So the Lucy is chanting mantras over this honey that then is distributed to the group, and people drink the honey. So to like ingest the power of the mantras. There's practices of opening the third eye, in order to allow healers to be able to see illnesses and to be able to better treat illnesses in their patients. And then sai sin, which is the wrapping of the thread around the wrist, in order to attach blessings and protection to an individual person. This is often done for patients, also for practitioners. And then two last photos I'll show you are of ritual kopsian, which is taking beneficial spirits. And the way that we invited Jivaka to come into the space in order to help empower the practitioners, you can also install or like download certain spirits directly down into the person, down through the top of their head, either for their protection or for healing or for empowerment or for other purposes. These are two other Lucy from the Bangkok area. So this is now, I changed from Chiang Mai to Bangkok. These two, on the right, you have like a spirit possession, right? In the first case, it's bringing the spirits down to bless the person. In the second case, it's bringing the spirits down so that so the spirits move the person's body and are able to act through the person's body. And in this case, this is happening at a traditional medicine school, and these are massage therapists who are receiving the spirits into their bodies so that the spirits can help to do the healing, right? That the spirits will move the hands in order to heal the patients. So this is a whole range of different things that I kind of was learning about, was learning to practice, that I was being exposed to, becoming more and more curious about these practices. And eventually, after being there for about 4 years in Thailand, doing all of this training, I decided really that I was going to go back to graduate school in anthropology and go into the formal study of these kinds of healing practices, specifically the integration of religion and medicine in Thailand. So from 2001 to 2005, I was a part-time student doing a master's degree, while also I learned that the type of massage and kind of some of the herbal medicine that I learned in Thailand was actually marketable in the United States. So I started, most of my time was spent practicing medicine, but I was also going to school part-time. So I did a master's degree. It should have been a year or two, and it took me 5 years to do it because I was part-time. But my project was on the history and ethnography of traditional Thai medicine. So kind of taking the stuff that I had learned about in Thailand, that I was exposed to in Thailand and interested in, and then understanding the roots of it, understanding how it was practiced more widely in society. Where does this come from? How did this connection between Buddhism and medicine happen? Like why is there this connection between Buddhism and medicine? Does it go all the way back to, the early India? How I was just curious about all of this and became interested in doing a more formal study. So I did my master's thesis on that topic. Eventually, I published that as a short book on traditional Thai medicine. And what I came to learn there while I was doing this research is something that all of you already know, which is that Southeast Asia is one of the most interesting places in the world. And why is that the case? Is because this is a place, Thailand, I think, is not any different than Singapore in this regard, is that this is a part of the world where hybridity is the norm, right? Where mixture and multi-layered cultural influences are the norm. That is the very heart of the culture and the history here. And so my conclusion in the master's thesis is actually, it turns out it's the most simple conclusion ever, but it took me 8 years to get there, to sort of understand this for myself, is that Thai medicine is interesting because it's multi-layered, because there's Buddhism and indigenous kind of local spirit traditions, and because there's an influence of Indian medicine like Ayurveda and yoga, and because there's an influence of Chinese medicine on top, and because it's been filtered through colonial period kind of modernizations and also because there's Muslim influence in the area, and also because there's modern biomedicine, and it all gets sandwiched on top of one another, and it all gets integrated and blended in a unique way that is just really fascinating. And so for me to kind of like spend those years thinking about those processes of cultural blending, cultural mixing, right? That was, to me, was the most interesting thing here. And then in 2002, something happened that changed my life, and that was the publication of Michel Strickmann's book called Chinese Magical Medicine. It came out in 2002. Michel Strickmann is a famous historian of Chinese religion, Chinese Buddhism and Taoism. Many of you know his work. This book was published after he died. There was some delay. I didn't know very much at all about Chinese history, Chinese medicine. But this book came across my desk. I thought it looked interesting. I picked it up and I started reading. It's a book about Tang Dynasty, Chinese Buddhism and Taoism, and its relationship with medicine. And I started reading this book, and it was like every page of this book was describing something I had done in Thailand. Every page. It looks different. The talismans look different, but they work the same, right? The invocations sound different, but they work the same. The healing protection looks different, but it sounds the same. And I was reading this book about Chinese medicine from, 1400 years ago, and it was so similar to what I had learned in Thailand. And this, for me, was shocking, because when I was in Thailand, when I was in Lana, in Chiang Mai, they were saying, this is Lana medicine. This is our medicine. We only do it here. This is what makes Lana special. We have this unique form of medicine in Lana, found nowhere else in the world. And they're right. They're right. You don't find anything else like Yam Kang and Jivaka Waikru and all those things that I showed you. You don't find exactly like that anywhere else. But I discovered that the Buddhist features of Thai medicine, the exact thing that in Lana they were saying was the local, turns out to actually be part of this multi-millennia history that encompasses all of Asia, right? In the form of Buddhism. So this, for me, this opened up a whole new chapter in my thinking about what I had seen in Thailand and what it really meant. Right? It was no longer just a story about Thailand. It was no longer just a story about Thai medicine. This was a story about Buddhism and medicine, right? So with that, this book, I read it. It came out in 2002. I probably read it in 2003. Immediately, I started applying for graduate school for a PhD program. At this point, I was like, I don't care about practicing Thai medicine anymore. I need to know about Buddhism and medicine, the big picture. What is this all about? Problem is, you can't do a dissertation. Everybody here knows you can't do a dissertation on like 2,000 years of Buddhism and medicine history. You can't do that, right? Can you do that? No, it's not allowed, right? Not allowed, not allowed. So what I decided to do was to narrow the focus. Michel Strickmann had passed away, right? He wrote this book and he passed away. So I was like, I'm going to pick that up. I'm going to continue what he was looking at. I'm going to continue that. So that's what I did. So for that time period, 2005 to 2014, that was a period of time I was doing a PhD, writing a dissertation, and developing eventually the book that came out of the dissertation. And the book was specifically looking at Buddhist medicine in China, so in medieval China, so following up on Michel Strickmann's work, but bringing a new kind of angle to the study, because what Strickmann was basically doing was kind of introducing the material. Of course, he had arguments to make, but he wasn't really looking at cross-cultural issues, cross-cultural medical exchange. How do ideas come from India to China? How do they get interpreted in China? How do they enter into the Chinese culture, right? These foreign practices. But of course, this is the same question I have about Thailand, right? It's the same question I have about everywhere, but I need to focus my dissertation, so I'm going to focus on China. This is the central problem that I thought about for 9 years, was how to think about cross-cultural exchange in a way that's rigorous and not just say, oh, Buddhism spread from India to China, right? Oh, Buddhism then Buddhist medicine spread to Thailand, right? To say something more rigorous, something more concrete about how cross-cultural exchange works. And so I was really focused on the translation of texts, the translation of Indian ideas into China. How do Chinese translators translate Indian concepts? How do they translate Indian words? How do these sutras that are written in India, when they talk about medicine, how is that translated into Chinese? Scholars know how Buddhism is translated into Chinese. They've been studying that for 100 years, but how do the medical terms, medical ideas get translated into Chinese? Was the thing that I was focused on. And what I really discovered through that work was that these translated texts, these ideas from India and texts from India, cultural objects from India influence the course of Chinese history. It changes the course of Chinese history. However, it's always also the case that the Chinese translators in China are also strategically deciding what to translate and how, right? So there's both an influence from India, but also a very active kind of strategic decision-making that is being done by the translators. So it's never just A influences B, it's always also B interpreting A, right? So there's always this kind of two-way relationship so in studying a phenomenon like cross-cultural exchange, you need to take into account like both what's circulating around Asia, right? And then also what are the local reasons? What are the local politics? What are the local social and cultural and economic factors that make people make decisions about what they're going to take up and how they're going to introduce it? So I was establishing this kind of methodology for medieval China, but already thinking it's the same thing. When Buddhism is introduced into Thailand, it's having a similar, there's a similar process. And during this time period, this is between 2005 and 2014, this is also exactly the time period where in America, where I was living, everybody suddenly became super interested in mindfulness. Is that a thing in Singapore? Mindfulness research, mindfulness stress reduction. Is that a thing here? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a huge thing in the US. It was
the
like
elevator coming up.
it's okay. Yeah. It became a very, very, very big, like almost universal fashion during this exact time period that I was working on China. In 2005, when I started, there was very little that people were saying about mindfulness. By 2014, it was on the cover of every magazine, and it was if you went to a psychologist, you went to a therapist of any kind, even in school, in elementary school, my kids were being taught mindfulness. It was everywhere. And so this was also interesting to me because this was another case of Buddhism influencing American culture, but Buddhism also being reinterpreted really very differently, right? Being fit into a biomedical therapy framework is a very different form of Buddhism, right? A very different interpretation about Buddhism. So it was this same kind of dynamic was also playing out right in front of me, in a new cultural context. So I started formulating some ideas at this time. I'm seeing what I saw in Thailand, what I'm researching in China, what I'm seeing happening in the US, and I start kind of like reading around other scholars talking about other places in Asia, talking about Japan, talking about Korea, talking about Tibet. And I realized that this was this dynamic of both the influence and the reception of these ideas, that this dynamic was something worth studying across Asia, right? Studying across cultures, studying as a global phenomenon in the modern period, a global phenomenon beyond Asia, right? How Buddhism and medicine are intertwined, and how that intertwined thing both influences other cultures and is interpreted by other cultures all around the world. And I called that Buddhist medicine. I said, all right, that's what I'm interested in studying, is this thing I'm going to call Buddhist medicine. So Buddhist medicine is not a specific tradition. In the way I use the word, it's the term. It's not a specific tradition. It's not a specific set of beliefs. It's not a specific list of things that you must do or practice or believe. But it's a dynamic. It's a tradition that influences and is constantly being reinterpreted. Both, right? It's something that circulates and also is constantly changing. I like to say Buddhist medicine, that term Buddhist medicine I use it like I use the term Buddhist art, right? If you say Buddhist art, you're not talking about any specific style. You're not talking about any specific content, but still, Buddhist art when you see it, right? There's still something there. There's a context there. There's a tradition there. It might look completely different if you're in, 2nd century BC India versus, modern Japan. It looks totally different, but it's still part of a tradition, part of a shared tradition, even while there are all these differences and reinterpretations. So Buddhist medicine as a unit of analysis, it's something like that. So this book came out in 2014, and I considered maybe this is a good tip for graduate students. Write the dissertation you need to write. Publish the book you need to publish. Then once you have a tenure position or something where you're comfortable, then do the project that you wanted to do all along, which is for me was this global history of Buddhism and medicine, right? So I waited until I had tenure, I had the comfortable position from which to do that, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna now widen the focus to the whole world for the last 2,000 plus years. So by the time 2014 rolled around, that book came out, I had a few things that a couple different kind of angles that I started to work. One of them was that I realized that I got a job in 2010 in Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, if you don't know this, it's near New York City. It's one of the big cities on the East Coast of the United States. And it has a very diverse population with many people from lots of different Asian cultures. And it turns out that the city has about 50 Buddhist temples of all different kinds. Thai Theravada Buddhism, yep. Tibetan Buddhists from Kalmykia, yep. Japanese Buddhists, Korean Buddhists, Chinese Buddhists of all types, Taiwanese Buddhists. There's all sorts of different traditions, all sorts of different cultural traditions in the area. And so I started doing research with some of my students who speak those languages and were able to, do ethnography. I started to catalog all of the various types of Buddhist medicine happening in these communities right inside the US as well. Also looking at English-speaking white Buddhists, what were they what kinds of ideas did they have about medicine. So starting to gather now like a third research field. So I had the Thai medicine research field, the Chinese history research field, and then also developed this research field in the US. And what you can see here is I'm also getting back to my anthropology methodologies, right? So this is now back to a contemporary ethnographic project. So kind of was like the revival for me of both of my previous interests in ethnography. And that's something that those two tracks have kind of gone together for me. So my PhD is in history, but a lot of my work is ethnography. So yeah, so anyway, this all kind of culminated in the books that Mike was mentioning earlier. The two books on the top are the anthologies that he mentioned. 96, 96, I think that's right. 96 contributors participated in the project. It's about 1,500 pages, translations from all over the world, from all across time. As long as Buddhism's been around, and I tried to really get Buddhism like every tradition of Buddhism represented that I possibly could. Translations of texts from scriptures that are thousands of years old to ethnographic reports and interviews with practitioners, and all over the world today. So those are those two books, and then a series of edited volumes of analytical essays by scholars about Buddhism and medicine in different contexts are the two on the bottom. And then this global history. I don't know how to get rid of that, actually. I just noticed that's there. But the global history of Buddhism and medicine is kind of like a book that I wrote that sort of like came out in 2022. So it was after all of this kind of time thinking about all of this, I finally wrote the book that I thought about writing from the beginning, which is the global history of all of the different threads of Buddhism and medicine. So really like tying together my research with then a huge body of secondary scholarship from all sorts of different folks, talking about the relationship between Buddhism and medicine all over the world. So this is my last slide. That brings me to kind of maybe just to reflect back on the kinds of questions that have been influential. And I've already mentioned these. I just want to kind of like highlight it again for you. So for me, I would say that the key to a long and productive career in scholarship, I would say the key is to have productive tensions. So that is like if everything just makes sense, it's a little bit too boring. It's not going to be that productive, right? So I've had these tensions, these things that I can't resolve, these unresolvable tensions that kind of just keep drawing me in, keep making me interested in studying more and saying more, exploring more, looking at that again, keeps drawing me back again and again, keeps me kind of interested. I'm like a dog chewing on a bone. I have pet dogs, and you give it a bone and they just go crazy and they're like, "Rah, rah, 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 rah," and they can't stop, right? I'm a little bit like that. Mike said I'm a machine and very productive. I'm manic because I'm just I gotta solve this problem. You keep going back to that bone, right? And so these tensions, these things that are like unresolved, that sit there, that kind of like encourage me to keep coming back. So there's a couple of them, and one of them is this kind of like tension between my time as a practitioner and my time as a scholar. They're really different approaches, really different kind of methodologies, really different kinds of ideas, background, kind of knowledge that you bring into your work. And so the whole time that I started off as a practitioner 100%, then I became a scholar, but only probably like 85%, 90% scholar, because I've always continued to both practice myself and also teach non-scholarly people and write non-scholarly books about Buddhism and Asian medicine and other topics. So that's always I've always had this kind of like two lives, right? Two sides of, there's the professional academic work, and then there's this other stuff that I do. So that's been a productive tension. And then I mentioned this kind of tension between ethnography and history, right? I think I would say a fully interdisciplinary scholar. I can't decide which one I am. Am I an ethnographer or a historian? I'm both. I do both, right? And there's always an interesting tension there between, you know, like the whole story about what you see in Thailand and then what you read in Tang China, right? That kind of productive tension between these two methodologies has been really interesting for me. And then this tension between the global breadth versus the local depth, right? When it comes to doing a study, right? I have done both, like the deep study of a particular context and the broad study of you know, a wider view. And I keep going back and forth between those, right? I'll do a big study and then a narrow one and then come back out again, then go back in and out like that. So again, it's a productive tension. Don't have to decide which one I want to do. Then this tension between cross-cultural transmission, right? The influence of things that circulate versus the local reception, the recreations, the reinventions that happen locally as people take up these practices, take up these ideas and make them their own in their own particular ways. That's been really a productive tension. And then the last one is a little bit like the same, but more focusing on individual people rather than cultural or social scale, right? So it's true that on the social scale, on the cultural scale, there's things that circulate and then interpretations and reinventions, local traditions. But I'm also really interested in individual people and how they feel impacted by traditions that they take on, right? How does becoming a Buddhist, how does that change you personally, or becoming learning how to work with healing, you know, some kind of healing technique? How does that change the way you understand your own body? How does that change the way that you yourself live your life? So impact on the individual versus individual agency. How do you make decisions that transform the tradition as you enact the tradition, as you use the tradition with your patients, as you embody the tradition yourself? What agency do you have to sort of transform that tradition? Yeah, so these, you know, again, these are, those of you who have been in Professor Stanley Baker's class probably have seen a duck rabbit or a rabbit duck. No, you don't show that anymore. Okay.
Yeah, not many people come to the
No.
class.
Okay.
Just people.
Okay. So Mike has this great image. I should have put it in my slides. I don't have it, but it's a drawing that if you look at it one way, it looks like a rabbit. You look at it the other way, it looks like a duck. You know this? It's a famous kind of example. Yeah. So these are my duck rabbits or rabbit. Is it rabbit duck or duck rabbit? I don't know. I forget which one. These are my duck rabbits, right? You look at something one way and it's all global, and then you look at this different way and you're like, oh, it's all local, right? And it's both. It's always both, and seeing it both ways, and being able to kind of investigate and change perspective like that has been, for me, that's kind of what I do. So across all of the publications, across all of my work, whatever it is that I'm looking at, it's always that. It's always the paradoxical nature of, you know, the local and the global, the impact and the agency. It's always that keeps me coming back again and again to these subjects. Right. So that's Mike asked me to kind of talk about my career, talk about where these sort of how I came to where I came to, what ideas kind of are on my mind about all of this, and to have a little bit of a case study, which is this Lana medicine case study. But I don't have an agenda beyond that, just other than fulfilling the task that was set for me to do. And I'm very interested in kind of talking about whatever it is that you all want to talk about, or having whatever kinds of questions or conversation. We can kind of take it in any direction you want. So I appreciate the opportunity to kind of open that up, the conversation, and look forward to getting to know you all more. So thank you again for the invitation. Thank you for wonderful hospitality in Singapore. And yeah,
Brilliant.
happy to be here.
That's super exciting. We can't thank you enough. That's it. Yeah, I asked and you delivered exactly what I was
Okay,
looking for.
good,
Yeah.
good.
So now we have a sort of the beginning of an answer to what is Buddhist medicine. Well, why like that?
Mm. And I'll be giving a talk at 7 o'clock, and the title of the talk is basically what is Buddhist medicine. So
Okay.
there'll be more detail to be delivered there.
Yeah, welcome to come along. We can, yeah, I might post the details on it. Well, yeah, so maybe do you want to tell us where it will be? Is there room for people who want to come along?
Tonight we'll be having lesson at Mingsi. Mingsi Temple near, it's actually in Bukit Timah. I will, how can I share information? Is that a way I can share? Put it on the screen.
I'll put it on the screen.
Yeah, sure.
Just the postal code. Yeah, Google Maps. Is it long? Okay. So-
Yeah, and the people in the Zoom won't be coming, so you guys are all abroad. So those of you who want to who have questions online, we'll be taking questions here, but feel free to put I see Olga, you got your hand raised. Nice to see you, Olga. Feel free to just type your message into the chat, and then when it comes to, when we come to asking questions from online people, we'll just call that up and then ask you to, come online and just tell us. But this will give us a little précis that we can read while we're coming along. So while you're typing your questions there, any questions from the room here? Questions, comments?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
So in the interim, maybe I can ask you a practical comment? Okay. So question.
We were just wondering, we are following Joe Dispenza, Dr. Joe Dispenza, where he use energy. And this Buddhist chanting is part of it, is there very close, I think I see the close relationship between the two entities, you know. Maybe you could get into the study too, you know.
Yeah, good. I like that question a lot, actually. This is from Nixon. So I don't know very much about Joe Dispenza. I don't know exactly what the teaching is or what the practice is. But I've thought a lot about this word energy. Right? So this word energy is an English word that you used, right? So the fact that it's an English word makes it able to hold a lot of different things within that word. What I mean is that people use the same word, energy, when they're talking about qi, but also when they're talking about prana, and also when they're talking about lung, and also when they're talking about lom, and also when they're talking about electricity, and also when they're talking about magnetism from 19th century Europe, and also when they're talking about lots of other things too, right? And so it gives us, it's energy is like this box that people can throw all kinds of things into, right? And then they look like they're talking about the same thing. Then it looks like qi is the same as prana, is the same as lung, is the same as lung, which is the same as electricity, which is the same as magnetism, right? But it only looks like that because we're using the same word. And so for me, as a historian of translation, right, or a scholar that studies translation, I'm interested in, this is another duck rabbit. It's both. So there's similarities between all of those things, but there's also differences, right? So there's important similarities and then there's important differences. So when it comes to qi, prana, long, lung, right? These are all similar because they're ways of talking about the the interioception, right? The perception of the inside of your body and being able to understand the way that sensations on the inside of the body can move around and how maybe if you pay attention to those, it becomes more, they become more clear and you can feel things that you didn't feel before and you can feel things moving around, right? So there's similarities between those, but then there's really important differences in how people conceptualize because qi, right? Qi is clouds and vapor, right? But prana is light. You know, that's different, right? And lung is wind, right? And those are different ways of kind of conceptualizing, right? So so it's both. There's both similarities and differences. So I don't know about Joe Dispenza and how he's using energy, but that's how I would think about. I would go listen to Joe Dispenza and think about, you know, what the similarities and differences are between his understandings and what he says and versus what other traditions say and what other traditions have to say about it. Yeah. Yeah.
There's a Nolan question on a similar line, actually. She's asking, do you see a similar belief among Thai Buddhists as the Chinese belief of yin and yang? Namely, she qualifies it, the need for balance in our body.
Yeah, great. Yeah, who's that?
It's from BB. BBC.
Yeah, thanks, BB. Yeah, this is a good this is another good question. Yeah, so the question is differences between Buddhist medicine versus yin yang in Chinese medicine. So in the translation of Buddhist medicine around Asia, I talk about there being this will be in my talk tonight. So come to my talk tonight for more detail. But there's parts of Asia where when Buddhist medicine is translated into the local area, the Indian medical ideas are more influential. And then there's parts of Asia where the local ideas are more influential. And so in some parts of Asia, when they're doing Buddhist medicine, they are talking about the Mahabhuta, earth, water, fire, wind. And that's the main framework for the medicine, right? So it's like that in Sri Lanka, Thailand, Myanmar, Tibet, Mongolia, Cambodia, Laos, traditional medicine in all those parts of Asia, they deal with the Mahabhuta. That's the primary framework. But in China, in the Tang Dynasty, the period that I studied, some translators translated, when they translated the Sanskrit term Mahabhuta, sometimes they translated that into Chinese as Si Da, right? Which is, again, earth, water, fire, and wind. And so in the Tang, there was kind of like a little bit of a time period in Chinese history where that was actually an important medical theory. And some of the historical doctors, Sun Tzu and Chao Yunfan, these historical doctors actually referred to, and you find this in Korea and Japan as well. There's some, you find them talking about Suda, the four great elements, right? Mahabhuta. But that's not the main, that's not the main idea behind Buddhist medicine in East Asia. It was important in the Tang Dynasty for an amount of time, but then it became more prevalent to translate the Indian terminology into Chinese terms, qi, yin, yang, wuxing, all of these. And so today, I think, from what I've seen in most of East Asia, when Buddhists talk about Buddhist medicine, they're usually talking about Zhongyi. They're talking about Chinese medicine. done at a Buddhist temple or done at a clinic that's paid for by Buddhists, right? It's usually zhongyi because it's been locally translated, localized, right, in a way that is different than what was done in Thailand and Myanmar and Tibet and other places, right? So the question here, it just depends on where you are, right? Is what's the difference between Buddhist medicine and yin yang? Well, it depends on where you are. If you're in East Asia, if you're in Chinese speaking Asia or in Korea or Japan, probably Buddhist medicine is yin yang, wuxing, right, qi, etc. But if you're in Thailand, it's earth, water, fire, wind. It's Mahabhuta. Yeah. Right. And it's just like it's exactly like painting, like Buddhist art. Right. If you're in East Asia, Buddhist art looks a certain way. If you're in South Asia, Buddhist art looks a different way. It's both Buddhist art, but it's about how it's interpreted locally. Yeah.
I agree. So are there differences in Theravada or Mahayana Buddhism
Yeah.
on the practices or even the text? So that's my first question.
Yeah.
And then within Buddhism, right? So we know the different schools.
Yeah.
So how does those different schools affect medicine? Like the Shingon school versus the Tendai school? Like what specifically, in terms of healing?
Yeah.
Is it more of a practice thing or theory? Or I know
Yeah,
it's very big, but I'm very curious.
This book, the first half of the book is about this. So yeah, this is 2022. Yeah, history of Buddhism. So yeah, so the first half of the book is about that question with like lots of detail. But I'll just say, just really briefly, yeah. So Buddhism is not one thing. There's many kinds of Buddhism, and so Buddhist medicine is not one thing, right? There's many kinds of Buddhist medicine, and so generally speaking, early Buddhism is less enthusiastic about medicine. It's not that there's no medicine, but it's less important, less central to the tradition. As you have Mahayana Buddhism, it becomes more important to the tradition. And then as you get to Vajrayana Buddhism, it becomes like absolutely essential and inseparable from the Dharma, right? So you have different levels of discourse, right? In the early Buddhism, there's a lot of like boundary making. Monks are not doctors. Doctors do that. We do this. There's, you're not allowed to do medicine within, for the public. And there's certain kinds of like rules and containment and boundary making between religion and medicine. With Mahayana, then you have the Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva is the person who enacts, compassion in the world, and that is their Dharma practice. And medicine becomes a central way of being a Bodhisattva is to provide medicine, medical care. And so then you have, Bodhisattva. So monks, so in early Buddhism, you have, monks and doctors are different. In Mahayana, you have, well, bodhisattvas and doctors are the same, right? Doctors are bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas should be doctors, right? Or should be providing medical charity, or should be promoting medicine, health, and healing in some way, right? So there's a shift in the, which means a shift in institution also. So that in Mahayana countries, you have Buddhist temples become kind of very important medical resources for the community. Yeah, so it depends on the, again, it depends on the local forms of Buddhism, exactly how that plays out. Yeah.
So I use your translate the Buddhism and medicine. So those 12 tales that you've translated, I use it in my class. So then there's always my students will ask me, right? Because these are tales of monks who perform miraculous deeds.
Yeah.
And so there's, so I mean, my students they're not maybe thinking so carefully or thoroughly, but they're wondering why these monks healing. So I often talk, your thesis, your argument about how healing is a way to proselytize.
Yeah, yeah.
To a large extent, it's a tool. So then, students sometimes are curious about how do I put this in a more is the healing more important, or is the idea that you're gonna get a believer? Not that it's more important, but like at what juncture, right? Like, when these tales were recorded,
Yeah.
you're right, it's always in retrospect. So there is this different layers, like what happens for the practitioner and what happens for the religion, if we were to separate in the Western classroom, right, where the two are very often separate and there are ethics involved in case studies like that.
Yeah. So there you're talking specifically about Chinese ideas about
Yeah, but
about
they're
Buddhism
foreign
and
monks,
healing,
right?
right? So they're foreign monks. This is about foreign monks coming to China. Probably most of them legendary, not actually historical, but anyway. Foreign monks being famed in China for having these healing abilities, and how that promotes Buddhism as a healing, as a tradition that has a lot of importance when it comes to healing, right? So for me, that is a recurring theme in Buddhist history.
Yeah, even today, right?
Even today, you live in the United States, and most people, if they've heard about Buddhism at all, they know that it's good for stress and good for health, right? That's the only thing they know, right? If they know one thing about Buddhism, it's good for your health, right? So again, Buddhism is like primarily being introduced as a health benefit, right? So I don't think it's that different. But the question that you asked is about, it's really a question about Mahayana doctrine. Mahayana Buddhism doctrine is talks about the importance of the compassionate sharing of resources with all beings, with as many beings as you can, in order to help relieve their suffering, right? And that is like the kind of the heart of what Mahayana Buddhist doctrine is all about, when it comes to healing. Why are you doing healing at all? Is because it's an embodiment of your compassion. But that also results in people converting to Buddhism, right? Yeah. So it's a duck rabbit. It's both, right? It's both an expression of compassion and also a marketing strategy. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for this wonderful presentation. I have 3 questions. Could I ask them from back to front for the slides?
Yeah.
My first question is related to your last slide. I am convinced by this the last point specifically. I'm curious as to why didn't you contrast agency with structure? I would like to know your thought process behind why you have drawn attention to impact rather than structure versus agency in this particular case.
Yeah.
That's the first question.
Yeah. I didn't think too much about it when I didn't think like, oh, I'm going to decide not to use structure. But when you're asking me the question right now, what comes to mind is that so here I'm interested in the individual experience, right? The individual human person's experience. I do a lot of like interviews in the ethnographic work. I do a lot of interviews with people about their own personal lives, their own personal experiences of, Buddhist medicine in various different ways. And yeah, so it wouldn't be wrong. It would not be wrong to say that they talk about the structures that they have to fit themselves into, right? So somebody becoming a monk or being trained in a medical tradition has to take on a certain kind of discipline. They have to change the way they work with their bodies. They have to perform certain kinds of tasks and so forth. Yeah, so it's not wrong to say that they're conforming to a structure. I guess it's just in the interviews for me, what I'm listening for is how they feel about that, right? The impact on the individual of that, of those structures. And then where do they feel like they have agency? Where do they feel like they have the ability to, where are they feeling like they have to conform versus where do they feel like they're able to exert agency on and change the tradition, right? There's a lot of like, yeah, it's a dance that practitioners have between the tradition kind of shaping them versus them shaping the tradition, right? Yeah. Yeah.
My second question is related to that slide which you showed of many Buddhist institutions and where you had done some field work with your students. Yeah, this particular slide. So, I am convinced by your theorization of this idea of Buddhist medicine, but I'm also wondering, is this idea of Buddhistness asserted by your informants, or is it something that is retrospectively reflected upon
Yeah.
with your knowledge as an academic in this very
Great question. Yeah. Yeah, that's a really essential question. So in this slide is specifically talking about in the United States, in Philadelphia. So in the United States, in Philadelphia, Buddhist temples are serving a very important function for their communities. So these are communities where, so the temples I'm talking about here are the temples where the majority or all of the practitioners are themselves Asian or the children of people who immigrated from Asia, right? First or second generation. The primary language in the center is Vietnamese, Lao, Cambodia. It's not English. They're primarily non-English speaking environments. And the temple is serving as a community center for those communities to get together and be able to speak their home language, to be able, they always have food. It's always like making food together, eating food together. It's always, like so-and-so just came back from Thailand with a big suitcase full of, I don't know what, and she's sharing it with her friends, right? And it's always a place where people come together to connect around their home culture, right? So it's never just about Buddhism. It's always about culture. It's always about identity. It's about belonging. It's about making space to share information. It's about networking. It's about the kids are learning Thai. The kids are learning the dancing, right? It's a space where people there's a lot going on that's more than just Buddhism. But the Buddhist temple is the place that happens, right?
By extension to your response, the first point is that doesn't this create an ontological fuzziness about where does the Buddhist medicine begin, where does the Buddhist medicine end?
Yep.
And the second point is, instead of talking about medicine, would we be looking at medicines? Yeah, I'm stealing from Indian books. Idea that medicines rather than a medicine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the boundary, like where is Buddhist medicine stop, right? Is I keep coming back to this, like, because this is the question I've been asked like over and over and over again for 25 years, right? Ever since I started this project. And I eventually realized it's the same as Buddhist art. It's the same. We do the same thing, right, with Buddhist art. So like, a Japanese manga about some samurai some samurai adventure, and then at some place in the story, Guanyin appears. Is that Buddhist art or not? Is the manga Buddhist art or not? It's fuzzy, right? Like maybe it's Buddhist art, maybe not. Maybe or the graffiti artist Banksy, right, has a picture of the Buddha, right? Is that Buddhist art? Maybe not. I don't know. How about a Buddhist making art that does that make it Buddhist or not? Like maybe so, maybe not, right? Yeah, so all of these questions are the same, or apply also to Buddhist medicine, right? So I met a surgeon, a surgeon in Korea. He does, you know, high-tech biomedical, surgical procedures, but before he does them, he visualizes that he is one of Guan Yin's hands as he goes to do the surgery, right? Is that Buddhist art? I mean, Buddhist medicine? Um, or there's a Michael and I went to a clinic yesterday in Singapore. It's it's called the Buddhist. What's it called?
Buddhist Medicine Institute or something.
It says Buddhist medicine, right in the title. But what they do is Zhongyi, right? And we asked them, oh, what's Buddhist here? And they said, well, at one point somebody funded the original funder, was Buddhist, so we have that in our title, but we don't really do any Buddhism.
Yeah.
Is that Buddhist medicine? No.
That was special case because she was like, well, this is in Singapore, so we can't say religion. So it was like, right? So that also fits the questions you could ask locally too.
Yeah. So these are the border cases, right? Yeah. These are to your point, these are the fuzzy boundaries, right? So for me, what's most interesting is not answering the question clearly based on what I think, but rather to listen to the way that the individuals in the communities are describing it themselves, right? And to try to think about, how are they representing the relationship between Buddhism and medicine? How do they understand the relationship between Buddhism and medicine? What kinds of boundaries are they drawing? Are they including or excluding? Are they drawing lines here or there? Like, how do they think about this themselves in their communities? And are they making these choices because, of a political situation, an economic situation, right? To understand why the relationship between Buddhism and medicine is articulated in different ways in different settings by different people, right? To ask those questions instead of trying to decide for myself, right? Because Buddhist medicine is not. Yeah, here's how to say it. Buddhist medicine is not an object. It's a field of inquiry, right? It's not an object that I want to draw a boundary around and define really clearly, right? It's a field of inquiry. It's an arena, it's a topic to explore, right? Just like Buddhist art. Yeah.
My last question takes us all the way back to your introduction. The point that you made, I have this question is related to this emic ethic, who is in, who is out thing. You use this term, Dr. Monk.
Oh, yeah.
Person, is this an emic term or an ethic term?
This is the Thai, the Thai, like direct translation of the Thai. Yeah. But there's an issue, which is the Thai word ma. It's easy to translate it as doctor, but it also means like this guy's a ma because he's a ma ya because he's a doctor of herbs. This guy's a ma Taksen because he's a doctor of Taksen. This guy's a ma Sakyan because he's a doctor of tattoos, right? Right. So the word doctor is very flexible in a way that it's not in English. Yeah. So So when I said Dr. Monk, he's both a pra, which is a monk, and he's also a ma, which is a doctor, but it doesn't say what kind of medical expertise he has, right? It's just it's more like the word healer, probably. He's recognized as a healer in his community.
I see.
Not necessarily like a physician, right?
That brings, so there was once like we should use a traditional Thai medicine, but doesn't this particular ideas of tradition versus modernity, is this a term that your practitioners adopt for themselves, or is something that was slapped upon them by external forces like the state or some other regulatory body?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, Thai traditional medicine is a term that is regulated by the government of Thailand. It is it's there's a regulatory framework in place that is licensing doctors through the Ministry of Public Health and accrediting educational institutions through the Ministry of Education. It's like part of their reports to the WHO, right? It's very official. And this guy and what he does would be included in that report because traditional medicine being reported, at the governmental level, being regulated and so on and so forth, includes herbal medicine doctors and curricula. These guys would not be. These guys are unregulated local healers operating, underneath without official licensure, right? There's no license, there's no government licensure for the Ministry of Public Health for tattoos, right? These are all folk local unregulated healers. Yeah. So what I did with this book was looking at the whole healing landscape, right? All different kinds of healers, all different kinds of Ma and what kinds of medicine or healing they were offering, right? So both formal, trained, regulated doctors and also informal.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks very much.
Yeah.
So I'm conscious that we have 4 minutes left and some very lengthy and interesting questions online. So what I
Okay.
might do is read them out and like a number of them. Some of them you kind of
Oh.
addressed already.
Yeah.
And I'll as a group, and then give you time to talk through them.
Yeah.
So Olga Carlino, calling in from Germany, Italy. Where is it?
Italy.
Italy. Okay. It
Hi, Olga.
asks, it says, thank you so much for your talk. And I'm curious, how have tourism, the global mindfulness movement, and broader social changes over the past 20 years influenced Buddhist medicine in Thailand?
Oh, yeah.
Have these forces contributed to its growth or decline, particularly in relation to how attractive and marketed Thai message has become to different audiences? Does this transformation, is it also shaped by the particularity of different destinations? For example, Lampung and Chiang Mai, in terms of religiosity, messaging, and Buddhist healing practices, and how do these reflect varying degrees of change or commercialization? Myrtle Surpi, I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. Wants to thank you for not only for this great talk, but also for the Black Barrel podcast, which we didn't talk about, but it's a great podcast. I highly recommend it to everyone. And they're a scholar of Sowa Rigpa, Tibetan medicine, and doing ethnography in the Western Himalayas, Kanara and Spiti. And they ask about the tensions that they could see in the fieldwork, and curious to know whether you encounter sectarian differences. For example, under the larger umbrella of Thai medicine, are there sects which differ?
Yeah.
And mentioning in Tibetan context, there's Gelug, but Yingpa and Kagyur, which have different approaches. And and I think okay, so two more. How much credence do you give to the minds of a certain area being suitable vessels for Buddhist medicine to have perpetuated these cultures for transmission, i.e. Buddhist medicine in an Islamic or a Christian country, and how does that affect the spread? And the last question asks about Zhuyo, incantation, magical healing in Chinese popular religion, and the relationship between Buddhist healing in a broader sense.
Okay, and I have 45 seconds to answer
You have
all those
45
questions.
Yeah.
Okay, so the question about competition, sectarian differences, that one's easy. Yes, yes, there's a ton of it. It's very brutal. And the groups are organized in Thailand along lineage lines. So it's my teacher and his teacher and his teacher, or my teacher and her teacher and her teacher. Right? There's lineages, and those lineages compete with one another, and there's often often ugly kind of like competitiveness between them. So yes, it's very much a sectarian kind of context. For Olga's question about the tourism in Thailand, yeah. So the picture that's actually on the screen right now is the old national temple in Thailand, Wat Po, and it is one of the top tourist destinations in the country. It's also the seat of one of the major medical schools in the country, and also very famous for what's in that pagoda that's right there, which are all these old medical tablets from the 19th century. There's also a huge like massage clinic on the grounds of the temple. So it's, very much tied in with tourism. Thailand has frequently done promotions globally as well as regionally, about its spa culture and its, a medical tourism destination, and Thai massage is a global brand, and so forth, and all of that really kind of draws attention to Thailand as a place that has, a rich tradition of traditional medicine. But what's interesting is that the traditional medicine is explicitly Buddhist. It's it's framed with Buddhist rituals. It's you go to the temple to learn about it, right? So it's a very kind of explicitly Buddhist framework. So as much as tourism is promoting Thai medicine, it's also promoting Buddhist medicine. And yeah, the other questions were about
Thank you.
Suyo, yeah, for sure. That actually that's a great topic. That's the topic of Michel Strickmann's book, was the one that really turned me on to Tang Dynasty Buddhist medicine. He has chapters in there, more than one, that sort of talk about Juyo and how Buddhism intersects with both Taoist practices as well as kind of a whole Buddhist kind of practice of talisman making and magical intervention. So refer to that book, I guess. Yeah.
The last question is about some minds being more receptive, i.e., in Islamic or Christian regions. It's cultural receptivity.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting a little bit itchy over the term minds being more receptive. That's a little bit not the way I would necessarily frame it, because it's like making it a little bit too stark, I think. I would certainly say that, because of culture, that some cultures are more open to receiving Buddhist influences, right? I mean, I think history has shown that Buddhism flourishes in some places more readily than others. It probably has a lot to do with politics, in my view, more so than the minds. But I think yeah, I'm not sure exactly how to answer the question, other than just, yeah, historically, Buddhism has spread in some places and has not spread in others, and I don't think it has so much to do with people's minds as it does with social, cultural, political, economic factors.
I want to back you up actually on the political thing and the situating religion and medicine in Asia and in Asia volume that I was at Dr. Sagar was actually the co-editor of that volume, but then stepped back at the end just to be the silent editor, but had a very, very clear hand in it. But the three papers that had very strong political influence, there were all the Buddhist papers. It was very clear that Buddhism and medicine and politics were very clearly aligned. This has been amazing, a wealth of knowledge and insight and the skills of being a scholar, and then craft and the personness of being a scholar, as much as the topics and the material. So I can't, thank you enough. So let's give Dr. Silver a big round of applause. So yeah, there's been a message. Thank you, Karen, for letting us know that there are spaces for people who might want to come to to Pomingsu tonight. and nice to see you all online.